of truth. Today we will be talking about She-Hulk episode 5. That's so crazy that we're on 5. The first episode that Mary and I had watched for the first time on the day of release. So this was just as big of a surprise for us as it was for you guys. I am one half of your host, Hunter, and I already said her name seconds ago, but this is
I'm the other half of your host, Mary.
actual lawyer. It's all very exciting. Um, Barry, we're gonna start the way that we always start if people are not yet sick of me. Actually, wait, hold on. Before we get into that, last week Barry was very serious and did a lot of legal talk. Not that serious, but did a lot of legal talk. And I channeled Madison by drinking some alcoholic beverages, having a good time. This week, there it is. Both of us are channeling Madison. We will still do legal talk, but we
R.I.P.
both have one. R.I.P. Oh, did she? She did not
Wasn't
die.
in this episode.
She wasn't in this episode, so we assume she's dead. But Mary, what were your general thoughts, feelings, opinions? I'm still going to be listening to you, even if I'm off camera for a moment. Please continue.
Okay. Um, so I feel bad saying this because I feel like I really love She-Hulk, but this was my least favorite episode, I would say. Not that it was bad, it just didn't have the same pizzazz I feel like the rest of them had. It definitely did, and we talked about it last time, I think, did the work of like her coming to terms with being called She-Hulk and what that means for her. Like it definitely was that episode of her finding herself in a way that I think definitely set the tone for we're gonna see some superhero stuff soon. First, we got the tease of the costume and embracing the name She-Hulk. So I think that was kind of a transition episode into maybe some hopefully kind of wacky type stuff, but maybe more superhero versus Cordy. I don't know. It was a little hard for me because I really loved 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. And this one just felt a little dull in comparison. But I felt like a bad person feeling that way. So I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, it wasn't my favorite episode that has aired thus far, but I will say I still thoroughly enjoyed it. And I don't know, maybe not quite as I feel like what you said wasn't like a downer opinion at all. But I still very much enjoyed it. I thought like the court case itself was a little bit less interesting than like the previous two, but maybe that's because it was more straightforward. And this episode was, like you said, a lot more about like Jen coming to term with name as opposed to like the actual court case or like the shenanigans involved. I will say, and maybe it was just me, but a lot of the comedy in this episode like really landed for me. I was just a giggling fool watching the whole episode. I think that like 4 and 5, even if 5 wasn't the strongest plot wise, I enjoyed, like, they made me laugh the most. They were really good. I think the show's really hit its stride as a comedy, especially all the stuff with Jen having to like bring her string of dates on trial. I wasn't expecting that turn, and I was delighted at how funny that ended up being. For me personally, I really liked it a lot. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there was some fun, like you said, superhero stuff. Kind of like they were setting the spike for the future. I mean, everyone watching this probably knows the episode ends with our first like legit Daredevil tease. Really, our first legit Daredevil tease in the MCU in terms of like Daredevil. I mean, obviously Matt Murdock was literally in No Way Home, and he has the fun thing catching the brick. But we like see a Daredevil costume item for the first time in the MCU, which is really exciting. And there's hints at Jen getting her own super suit, which we from marketing we already know what that looks like, but now we know how it happens in the MCU and where that's coming from. And it is not Melvin Potter from the Netflix shows. It is Luke, a different guy who is fun. But yeah, this episode, I I like that we've started to kind of begin with the legal aspect because I think for me that's some of the most fun to talk about for this show. But you kind of talked about at the end of last week, what a trademarking case would look like in the real world. So, Mary, as our resident actual lawyer, I am curious how you feel this episode handled the trademark, if the way the case played out makes sense at all. And yeah, just your perspective on the legal aspect. I will say I made a note of it. I noticed that the lawyers were more or less standing when speaking to the judge.
I noticed that too. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Yes, they heard me.
They
And or they've already filmed it, but and they just fucked up in episode 3. I don't know, but
did.
they were standing more while speaking to the judge. It's always a good sign. So, in terms of the trademark, again, should preface, I am not a trademark lawyer. So, if I'm wrong, wrong. But I really struggle with just the concept that like Jen being called She-Hulk is like her using a trademark, because she's not otherwise at this point using it. Like obviously the case ended up hinging on her putting her name in there on Matcher or what,
Mhm.
um, as She-Hulk, but like that's not a trademark. That's just a pseudonym at best, you know. So whether or not that counts as her using a trademark, I really struggle with. Anyone watching this, expert in trademark law, please comment. But I
Yep, let's
think
do it.
I really did appreciate sidebar. Mallory Book was introduced more formally in this episode, who is the person at GLKNH who represents She-Hulk in this case. We got a brief tease of her in episode 3 when she walked in the door, and then when Face Bukowski was just real sexist or something, she left. She's like a big figure in GLKH in the comics, and I feel like she had more of a presence in the script originally in the first 5 episodes than she got, because it almost seemed like we got to her here and we were supposed to know who she was and like anything about her. And
I
yeah, I really felt like she got cut, which whatever reason, I'm not damning the reason that they cut her, but like it really felt like she had gotten cut from the first few episodes, and then here she was, which is great.
right. Well, we know for to your point, we do know that the first couple of episodes got like cut around a lot. Like they said on record before the show even came out, I think, or maybe it was right after the first episode, that episode 1 being the origin episode was not the original intent, and that was like filmed as episode 8 or something, and then they recut the whole show. So that's entirely possible.
Yeah,
And yeah, I guess I didn't think about that until right now, but I did think it was interesting towards the end of the episode when Jen makes the comment to Mallory about like, I'm glad that we're friends finally. Like, I'm so glad that finally, after all of this time, we're friends. And that did seem like, okay, well, in the context of the show, you've kind of just started interacting for the first time. So, like, yeah.
yeah, and I had thought about that when she like popped in episode 3 and popped out, and that was it. I was like, she's a bigger character in the comics, and that's kind of, and she had a character poster, like she was advertised as a character, so I thought that was really odd, and I felt like this episode kind of confirmed the fact that she just kind of got cut, which whatever. But honestly, her thing in the comics is she's like the top lawyer at this firm, and her and Jen often have sort of a rivalry type of relationship. Yeah, because Jen's also a very successful lawyer. Of course, they want to, but and as you mentioned, we kind of see that when they get drinks and they're trying to like be friends because clearly they want to Heat more than anything. But I do appreciate her role in this episode as she kind of explained it better than I think otherwise would have happened. As her role as super lawyer sort of thing, she was like, okay, she trademarked it first, but we can prove that you were using it in the marketplace before that. And she's capitalized off that. As a lawyer, not that familiar with trademark, that was very helpful. Made a lot of sense. Made the episode make sense for me. Just that simple not phrase, just explanation there. But in general, I guess the plot was, as we know, Titania saw She-Hulk get in the news, liked it, whatever, was upset with her that she punched her out in the courtroom, episode 1, and so then used She-Hulk on the name of products. The question came down to, okay, Titania registered that trademark, whereas Jen just existed. And if you have a registered trademark, that tends to legally give you the right to that trademark. So you have to kind of prove other things. In this case, that Jen was using it, Titania was just kind of profiting off of it. And obviously, as you mentioned, the dates coming back around, which I did like. I liked how that was kind of a full circle moment for all those dates. Proved that she was She-Hulk. Again, I'm iffy on that counting as a trade thing, but I really am. Like, I just.
I was wondering in the sense of like, again, you said that you're not a trademark lawyer and you don't have, this isn't like your specialty. But yeah, it did strike me as like I wasn't sure the legitimacy of someone just saying, well, she legally trademarked it, but I have said it in the past, and then the judge being like, good point, I side with you, and then moving on. Which, again.
And imagine, let's say you just wanted a new name, and it was Thor. And let's say someone had trademarked the name Thor, whether it was Marvel Comics or what, you can't really. But let's pretend they have. Who's going to really sue you for going by a different name? Nobody, because it's not a trademark. You're not putting it on business or a product or what have you.
Okay, yeah. So essentially, it was dismissed less because She-Hulk didn't. It was dismissed because She-Hulk. It's just her name. Like, she wasn't using it for profit or anything like that. Like, the lawsuit in general didn't have like a real basis.
In real life, yes. In the show, that's not how they handled it. In the show, they handled it as if she was using a trademark in a very classic way, which she wasn't. But let's pretend Jen was using She-Hulk for her business as a superhero business. Let's set it up. It's incorporated. She-Hulk, whatever. Like, that's her trademark for that. So then the battle would be whether Titania was just trying to capitalize off of that. That's how they treated it in the show, which was interesting because it just, to me, isn't really a trademark issue at that point. I'm trying to think if Jen could have sued Titania for using She-Hulk as a name on stuff. But at the same time, it really just comes down to if she used another name for herself. Obviously, she transforms into the Hulk.
Right.
That's her second form, but like, it's the same person. She just uses another name. So the idea that that's a trademark, pretty ridiculous. Especially because we know Jen was not using products or in service of like a business or a general anything related to commerce, which is very important in copyright. Point being, the show treated it like it was a real trademark, but showed that Jen was using the trademark first and lawfully, and that Titania was just trying to like cheat off of it, essentially. But real life.
Interesting.
Question.
Yeah, again, like we said when we about 15 minutes ago when we started this, it was sort of a cut and dry case for the episode, and unlike the previous two, it was less the foundation of what was going on and more just like complementary to the theme, which again is totally fine and I enjoyed. Um, One thing I noted, which I don't think this was necessarily on purpose, but I did find amusing, was that the font that Titania used, like She-Hulk by Titania, looks a lot like the font of the Incredible Hulk, like 2008 movie, like title font, which I don't think was on purpose at all. But in my brain, I was like, that could be kind of funny because now we have like She-Hulk in the same font as like the Incredible Hulk from 2008,
I
and
can see
neither of
that
them are
being on purpose.
legally count. I mean, the first one does now, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I
Um,
can see that being on purpose, though. I mean, they brought back Emil Blonsky. Obviously, I mean, it's not really Incredible Hulk, but Hulk.
yeah,
And then we know last time, three, the leader is coming back and his appearance in that movie. So I could see them like really kind of leaning into we appreciate this movie now.
yeah.
So I could see them doing little things like that, and that would be sweet. I agree with that.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Well, on the topic of Titania, I was also very curious about your thoughts of how the show's continued use of that character because we mentioned last week that you know in the comics Titania and She-Hulk are more like punchy rivals, whereas in the MCU it seems like they're setting them up to be more like I don't want to say like cerebral rivals. Well, sort of. They hint that Titania is like slightly smarter than she comes off, especially that she would attempt to outmaneuver Jen in this way. But yeah, I do like that thematically within this show. Jen has consistently made the point that she is a lawyer first and a superhero second. So bringing in her classic comic book rival and then making that character like a law-based rival as opposed to like a punchy rival, I think that's cool, and I enjoy the way that this episode kind of like extended that, and I think I made a note of this too, specifically the way that Jamila Jamil plays Titania in this is very funny as like a parody of influencers, especially when you consider the fact that Jamila Jamil's whole thing online is that she is very like anti influencer of that kind, and she's very outspoken in her own way, like against exactly the kind of character that she's playing in this show. And part of me likes to think that Marvel Studios knew what they were doing when they cast that character. Of like, they were very aware of the fact that that actress has a long sort of infamous history of like on social media raging against the Kardashians and all of that sort of stuff, and then playing an MCU Kardashian style figure. But yeah, I don't know. I was wondering your general thoughts on Titania and how they adapt this lesser known comic book character for the MCU within the context of this show.
She's definitely adapted within the context of
Yeah.
the show. I am obviously in the comics. She was not some social media influencer. She's very much this person who came from sort of a where exactly in the country she came from. I would say Midwest to kind of West. Like she came from a poor family and she came up, eventually got superpowers because of Secret Wars 1984. Don't freak out too much. That's different than 2015. You might want to freak out more about,
Not
but
the one they're adapting. Calm down.
it's different. It's different. And but then she kind of had this complex of I need to be stronger and better than everybody else, and she had super strength and whatnot. So we know in this show she has super strength and some sort of superpowers because obviously that's how she broke out in that first episode, and they've referenced her as powered influencer or something. And but we didn't see that this episode, like you mentioned, and so it is interesting because normally I think Titania and She-Hulk, it is that I'm going to quote you punchy relationship.
Yeah, you quote that.
We I don't know. I've not seen the rest of the episodes. I'm gonna bet all my money, most of my money, whoever's watching this, on Titania coming back for a bigger battle with
Uh-huh.
Hulk. Because of that, we know she has super strength. We know they want to fight each other. They're kind of rivals in comics, and like clearly now, not a good situation. Titania, I think, leaves kind of threatening. This isn't the last you'll see classic stuff. So I think that Titania is going to come back around. Jamila Jamil's big star in this role. They've done a lot of advertising for her, both just like in trailers and like in real life. They've had her or someone that was her go around LA and spray paint out the word She-Hulk on stuff and like
I know, like New York Fashion Week or something along those lines is happening right now, and Jamila went like in Titania costume, like went to one of the places that they normally use as like an outdoor runway, and like walked down the runway and was like, "You didn't think Titania would miss New York Fashion Week?" Like they've been doing a lot of public
yeah,
stunts like that to advertise her as like as though she's a real world influencer as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm willing to bet, and I'm always wrong, but I'm willing to bet that Titania is going to be sort of the pseudo main villain at a certain point, but I think the underlying villain that'll get more of a cliffhanger tease towards the series is going to be someone that leads into a bigger movie. Likely Cat 4, likely the leader. You
yes,
know, the people trying to get her blood, like you know. But I think Titania will exist as this rivalry in this situation. So I think it's interesting. I love Jamila Jamil. She's great. I feel like this morning I woke up and on Twitter I saw her on I don't know The View or something, just like talking about abortion. Like, you know, like she's just a great person overall, great person to cast. She's clearly having fun with the role
yeah,
inside the show, and I really love that. I think it'll be interesting what they do with her because this episode was pretty tame. I mean, even in
yeah.
the legal sense, the past episodes we've had a shapeshifter, and then we've had Donnie Blaze.
And like portals to hell
And
and
we've
stuff.
had Titania doing trademark law. So it was a little bit, you know, dulled in that sense, which I think is where I kind of came down. I'm like, yeah, I was into this one, it's not. But overall, I think Titania will come back sooner rather than later. I think she's going to be kind of the thing that comes up often. And in this case, she helped move the plot in terms of She-Hulk, but She-Hulk, and getting her costume and getting her suit that fits her and everything like that. I think Titania will be a plot mover for sure. She's
Yeah.
obviously
Well,
new.
I I like what you said about so like you're talking about her comic book. The MCU does a really good job of like adapting the vibe of something without having to necessarily adapt it exactly how it happens in the comics. And like you brought up, you know, in the comics, Titania's whole thing is that she's like kind of comes from what she perceives to be nothing and is like from the Midwest and then gets strength and is like, well, now I need to prove that I'm the strongest and like be the best and yada yada. And if that's not the same, well, not all of them, but if that's not the same origin story as like a lot of modern day influencers or like people who want to be influencers, like I feel like it's not that far fetched to think that MCU Titania is more or less the same thing, but in like a slightly different way. I wouldn't be surprised if in a later episode they reveal, oh yeah, this version of Titania is also from like the Midwest. And she came up with nothing, and then she got superpowers and used those superpowers to become famous in the same way that people wanted Jen to become famous, but where Jen doesn't want it, Titania is like all in because for her that lifts her from like nothing to something. And now that she is something, she is just out there being an influencer trying to prove that she is the best in the same way that a lot of influencers are trying to just like get more famous or, influence people in a way that they feel like no one else can influence them. And I feel like that has the same spirit that comic book Titania has. It's just manifesting in a much more modern, very different way within the MCU that fits better with the way they're portraying She-Hulk. So yeah, I do like that. I do like that a lot. Yeah, I feel like it has a similar spirit.
I agree with that a lot. I think it does, and I think I like your point of we'll find out she's from she's from in the comics, and like kind of have that similar upbringing, but this is sort of look in the 21st century versus
Right.
the 20th century in the comics. Yeah, I
Great. I I also think I made a pretty good point. Um, I was gonna say I also really like the subplot of this episode. On top of all of the trademark of it all is a little team up that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but ended up loving. Nikki and Pug go on their own little, like Winston CC mess around adventure, and I that's for New Girl fans out there. And I loved it. They have really good chemistry, and Pug just continues to be like so lovable and the best. And pairing him with Nikki, for me, that like I think the best parts of the episode weren't even Jen for like the first time because Jen's usually the MVP. I really liked all the stuff with Pug and Nikki, and I like that Pug has a shoe collection, and I like that in the context of the MCU, which I continue to say, they're Iron Mans, they're not like Jordans. Like I like that in this world, Iron Man is
they
sort of
have no
Michael
back.
Jordan.
There's no
There's
back.
no sports celebrities anymore. It's just
Football,
superheroes.
no American football.
There's no basketball. It's just Avengers. Um, but yeah, I thought all that was fun, and the show continues to show us what I said a couple episodes ago was not for me. It still doesn't necessarily feel like a new corner of the MCU in the way that like Werewolf by Night seems to be like a totally new corner of the MCU. It
No
spoilers unless you've
spoilers.
seen
I
the
have not
trailer, which
seen that
is
black and white dramatic trailer.
I know. But this does feel like a corner of the MCU that we are very accustomed to and have spent a lot of time with. We're just seeing it from new angles, and we're seeing the like behind the scenes of that same corner, which I really like. And I guess this is the first time. I think this is the first time in clearly defined MCU canon, just because the Netflix shows and Agents of Shield and stuff can get kind of iffy now. What? Uh, yeah, that we've seen like a guy who makes superhero costumes, whereas before we've always just assumed it was like they got their uniform from Shield or something like, or they made it by themselves or whatever. And I mean, not everyone can be as good as Peter Parker at just crafting your own durable super suit.
Iron Man definitely made his own. Captain America. Yeah.
Well, we know in the first Avengers movie, one came from the military. In the 2012 Avengers suit came from Shield because Phil Coulson designed it, and then post that I think it's been Shield or Tony Stark produced a lot of stuff.
Sam seems to have come from Wakanda, from the Falcon and Winter
Wait, whose comes from Wakanda?
Soldier. Sam Wilson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thus far it's been like Wakanda, Shield, the military, homemade, like somewhere in there. The Avengers seem to imply that Tony like produces a lot of their suits. Um,
And I agree. I think this episode was like, oh look, there's people who do this. And I
yeah,
think it goes to a broader concept of She-Hulk. Of there's a lot of these people around, more than we're normally used to seeing. But like in this universe, we've got a lot of super people, a lot of
yeah,
things. And I think what's interesting to me, and I think it's fun, it's a little much for me, but people who are really into the Netflix Daredevil series, which is a great series, knocking it down, but how far they're willing to go to like somehow justify why it's not Elvin or whatever who
yeah.
made the new Daredevil suit we got the tease of. It's interesting to me, but I think I gotta move on a little bit, or at least just like forget about that for a second. But it definitely shows that there's this corner, not even a corner, but in the MCU on the street level, we've got a lot of people fight crime or otherwise have costumes, and we've got people to do that, and it's just much broader than what we could have seen with
Mm-hmm.
picture Age of Ultron, and obviously Tony was funding everything, and maybe everyone's came from him, but like this is like the
Well,
general like could be super and then could go to this guy and
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like, and again, that's sort of what I mean when I say it's like the same corner of the MCU, but like a new angle. Where before, like we've seen these Avengers characters, we've seen these like She-Hulk type of characters, we've seen this world, but it's like we've only seen the celebrities, like we've seen like the A-listers, and what shows like She-Hulk are showing us are that the C and D listers have existed simultaneously like this whole time. It's just that we haven't been paying attention to their stories, and people aren't talking about Daredevil as much because he mostly operates in the shadows, or he mostly is, I mean, he's edgy. That's his whole thing. But but yeah, like exactly, like Daredevil has been out there doing his thing for a while. It would seem, even based on his No Way Home thing, and based on the fact that he has a guy and that he has a suit design and all that sort of stuff. He's just not a celebrity, so we haven't seen it. Yeah. Yes, Mary.
Okay, so this suit designer was in LA, as we know, because She-Hulk is in LA. Daredevil's at least is at.
Wait,
Um,
that's a really good point. What the heck is Daredevil going to be doing in LA, or
we
vice versa?
know, eh, but we know that, and I believe we put out an article today on Murphy's first. Check it out. That Daredevil Born Again seems to will be shot in New York, like it, should.
Yeah, Charlie Cox mentioned it in an interview.
Yeah, so he's a New York guy. We all know that.
Yeah.
But costume or some version of his costume is being made in LA. That raises a lot of questions. What is he doing? I'd like to dramatically think, and I don't think it's true, but I'd like to dramatically think that there is a lot of multiverse stuff going on since we are Saga, and we're going to see a different Daredevil than we see in Daredevil. And I don't think that's true, but I like it. Anyway, but in the comics, She-Hulk and Daredevil do come together in California and LA, also San Francisco. In terms of specific cases, my favorite and what is the biggest ones is Old Man Cap is being sued for wrongful death. When he, which first of all, statute of limitations doesn't seem like that would be an option, which just means you have so long to sue after something happens. And okay, so first of all, that'd be cool though if in the show Chris Evans and his old man gear rolled up. That would be super
This
cool.
would be no one would the internet would break down. No one would know what to do with that.
I'm so excited for him to come back to do that because I
He's
mean,
going to. We all know he's going to
we
at
know
some
he
point.
signed something that he's coming back from Marvel. Please God, I don't need it to be something in the past. I don't need it to be anything else. I need him to be Old Man Cap and like resolve what the fuck's going on with that. Anyway, probably Captain America 4 in theaters near you.
In 2024. Yeah. I feel like they would have had to have started filming already if they were going to hit 2023.
I knew it wasn't 2023. I couldn't remember if it was.
I think it's 24.
5 is when
It's like,
Thunder.
and I think it's like later 2024.
2024. If it's wrong, sue us.
Which
But
in MCU time is what, 2020, 2030, 2028, who knows?
in their benefit though, if they're like, oh yeah, it's 2082 now. Look at all this technology we have. We can survive incursions of different universes.
So like there's this guy named Miguel O'Hara now. Isn't that crazy? We've caught up. It's like, what? We got rid of Hydra, now there's Alchemax. We got to deal with this stuff. It is what it is.
That made me think of what if Secret Wars had Into the Spider-Verse characters in it? Like, what if Sony and Marvel could get along that well that we even incorporate?
Sony would only do that if there's a lot of money in it for them, which I mean there might be. I've said, listen,
Out there,
again,
so
this is not what this episode is about, but I've been saying for a really really long time that if Sony was smart, like Spider-Man 2099 would have had his own franchise. He would be on his third movie by now because that stuff is coolest. Um,
Hunter. This is all really hard with this background, but like.
yeah, it's not appearing.
Oh, hey!
There it is. Ah!
I got this at Rose City Comic Con this past weekend. Hashtag Portland. I don't know.
No one
But
has ever said
uh,
hashtag.
Spider-Verse is my favorite movie of all time. Other than Lion King, like the original 1994, I think it's like God tier movie. But anyway, point being.
Wait, I wanna point out before you continue that we have the same favorite movie of all time. Anyway,
Well,
please continue.
unless Lion King's yours. But
Unless Lion King 2 absolutely
Lion
slaps.
King is just like literally just above everything else at all times, and then we consider other things, which is Spider-Verse. Yeah, I love it. But okay, now there's another thing under it, but I'm not gonna pull it out. So anyway, okay, would be super cool if that happened in Secret Wars and they got like that friendly with each other. But you know, Sony is Sony. What were we talking about before
We're
that?
talking about Daredevil.
Daredevil.
Right. I'm gonna
Oh,
wheel us back in.
ooh, that's a good point. Okay, so because a lot of people are freaking out over this episode, I'm sure, is the Daredevil tease. I mean, sort of. We kind of knew he was coming anyway, so it's not like a what, you know, but want to follow Charles Murphy on Twitter, you may or may not get the hint that he may not be coming next episode, but but he will be coming at some point. He's also a lawyer. Matt Murdock is. Jennifer Walters. So likely they will meet in court. The promos have only shown them. I'm gonna finish the sentence. In kind of superhero garb, talking to each other. Your turn. Go for it.
So what you were talking about was that there is precedent of them working on a case together in the comics, and that was Old Man Steve. And then I was going
Great.
to bring up, yeah, and I was going to bring up the fact that there is in fact precedent. It's not L.A., it's San Francisco, but there, famously is sort of a whole thing with Daredevil where he does relocate from Hell's Kitchen to California for a little bit. And again, we don't really know, but unless Jen is going to New York, like maybe we're getting a taste of that in She-Hulk. Yes, Mary.
That was basically what I was going to say. Is
Great.
maybe I get the sense that Marvel, and I think most people get the sense, I'm not special, that Marvel with Daredevil is trying to honor the Netflix show, but have their own thing. So I think
Right.
in some ways they might try to transition it, meaning if we saw him in California or whatever, it's kind of this weird space of, oh, we've just met this guy. What's he been doing? Oh, probably that stuff we already saw. Not necessarily. And then we see him go forward. And I think that's what Marvel wants to do with a lot of its Netflix properties is
Yeah.
appreciate it and like keep the fans from it and keep the kind of hype from it to the extent that it was good. And Daredevil was good. I mean, there were some other shows that some people,
Yeah,
but
Daredevil was good. I will give it that.
Daredevil was good. So they want to keep that, but they don't want to be limited by whatever Marvel TV did at that time. So they
Right.
want to like hint to you, oh, maybe it's canon. You know, don't think about it too hard. We're just gonna
I
keep.
think I've been saying that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've been saying this for a long time, and I'm not the only one, but I firmly, 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 firmly believe that Marvel Studios, and I think this shows with the actors, I think this shows with the fact that even though what you just said, where I think they want to honor the Netflix series while also being like, this is our version, comes with like, we use Vincent D'Onofrio, but he has like our version of the Kingpin suit. And then we're using Charlie Cox, and his suit is visually the same style as the Netflix show, but we're doing the yellow suit, and that is to let you know that this is our version of the character. Uh, I was just gonna say however they explain that, I'm sure I know that we're probably in Born Again based on the bright red stage and logo and stuff. He's probably gonna get a new suit that's all red with the DD on it, which is great. I'm excited. Um, but yeah, I think that it's time to maybe accept that the Netflix Daredevil show is not necessarily like not canon. Like you said, I think that Kevin Feige respects it and all of that stuff. But I think that we have to look at it less as this is fully a canon show and more as this is canon in the sense that it's a variant timeline. Like I think that they're gonna say Daredevil in the MCU. I'll finish this and then yes, Mary. Daredevil in the Daredevil in the MCU is like the Netflix show more or less happened, and that's like the vibe of what Daredevil has been doing for the past couple of years. And whatever they like, they will lift and say, "Yeah, that's canon here too." And then whatever they don't like, they can they're not like beholden to it. And I think that's where we're gonna be. And I think that the suit looking a lot like the Netflix show, but also being different, and the California thing, and the way we see Kingpin in Hawkeye, and how he's advertised in Echo, and all of that sort of stuff. I think that is just saying like these characters have more or less lived the life that you saw in the Netflix show. We're not completely disregarding it. We liked it too, but we also don't want to like have to write all of our stories and remember all 3 seasons of that. Yes, Mary.
I was gonna call it comics canon.
Yeah,
I think that it's fairly similar. I mean, a lot of comics, you have certain arcs that are great, whatever. Later, they build off of those, but they don't always seem to care about all the details. And that's
right.
okay. And that may be what happens here. And if you loved Daredevil Netflix show, I'm very happy for you. I think that Marvel Studios will produce a Daredevil show, whatever happens with them, that can accommodate that. Like, if you really care about it that much, like every detail matters, I think you can at least be creative enough to keep that in your mind and form
Yeah, like
it. Right?
they won't outright be like this show is not canon. Like I think
Exactly.
it'll be
Exactly.
vague.
And
Yeah,
I think that because of that, I think it is very much a yes, we like this. Yes, this is what happened. Please do not. I think Marvel Studios ideally is asking, please do not care about every single detail that happened in that as we go forward. If you want to, I think you have plenty of room to do that. I know people don't like that. People want to know, is it this? Is it that? It's fictional. I'm sorry to tell you. So if there's headcanon for you or not, like go for it. I think Marvel Studios is like plenty happy to that. They know people love the Daredevil show. And I mean, the Defenders verse in general is relatively connected. I think that that's probably going to happen. Iron Fist, who knows? But I mean, with Jessica Jones, if she ever shows up, there were rumors she would show up in this show. I don't know if they're true. True, do not know if those are true. The director said she would love for Jessica Jones does. But I think it'll be a similar situation of the background because of Netflix, and this is how they're now telling the story. So you have to
yeah.
accept how they're telling the story based on how you know the story. Does it all fit exactly? Maybe not, and that's okay. Um, Sadly, I guess Marvel didn't just have everything together in one unit from day one.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean we know that from, as we've talked about, the Incredible Hulk, or very obvious things, X Men, Fantastic Four, and even just TV realm. So now that they're starting to pretty much get everything together, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be everything from every project they've ever done. But point being, coming back to She-Hulk, we saw the Daredevil helmet. He will be in California, likely LA, because that's where She-Hulk is. They will likely meet because they are working on our case. Somehow they'll meet as superheroes, and kind of. I guess maybe they never. They won't know. You know with She-Hulk though, he would always know. Anyway, sorry. But
Yeah.
I was trying to think if they were like Jennifer Walters and Matt Murdock in court, maybe they wouldn't know that they were She-Hulk and Daredevil.
Well, Matt would know because of his powers,
That's
and
fair.
also like we know in the trailer for like the mid-season trailer, he straight up gives her a speech of like, yeah,
That
you help people like as Jen and as She-Hulk separately, and so like they probably know.
And I think, yeah, I think Marvel
It would be
Studios.
funny if Jen didn't know. Like Jen was like, I don't know, like she doesn't figure it out ever.
This guy's
Like
not
Matt
very
knows.
interesting. I wonder. Okay, there were rumors, and I think innuendos with the comic, not D23 footage and whatnot, that they're a little flirty. I wonder how many people take offense to that. People take offense to everything.
People do. Well, I mean, again, in that same mid-season trailer, there's a quote like Jen is shown saying like, "This guy's really doing it for me," which I think hints that she's into it, and like that's been a theme of this show thus far is that Jen is looking for love, or not even necessarily love, but just
Jen
maybe a
is
good,
a woman who would be on that shirt Beverly equivalent. Yeah, like any other woman might be looking
like a human, like a person.
a day.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, like, I think that is on brand that she would be like maybe into this guy.
And
This devil
I
guy.
feel like we can't all be on Twitter like thirsting over Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock and then expect Jen Walters to feel any different.
I know, like, how could we expect her to feel like? I agree with that. That's a good point.
He's right there for her.
To all of you thirsting
Plus,
over Charlie
there's
Cox,
the wall.
Matt Murdock, Daredevil.
We have
How
a fourth
dare
wall.
you?
Jen does not.
How dare you judge Jen Walters, She-Hulk, for doing the same?
You have access. We do not. And go for it.
I
Go
think
for it, girl.
I think it will speak a lot to how they handle Daredevil in the show, and I want to emphasize that to our 43 views. In this show, Daredevil Born Again, I think they've even quoted and said like She-Hulk does not set up Daredevil Born. Which is
No.
interesting because like is it multiversal? Like I said, like, I'll go for it. But he will be different in the show than you're used to, and probably what he'll be in the future. So if he is funnier, maybe flirtier, maybe he has a thing with She-Hulk, and you didn't expect that, okay, like it is a story, like with it, but like yeah, I mean,
The thing is, to be fair, both in the comics, both Matt Murdock and Jen Walters have a long history of like hooking up with other heroes and vigilantes and stuff, and that's just like they're both yes, Mary.
it's kind of unrelated to the hooking up part, but they may or may not hook up in the show. You do you, deal with it, guys. People do that. But what do we think if it's not?
Don't tell the children.
I don't know. I haven't seen it. Um, if it's not okay, so in the dual run of Shield, I'm very confident I'm saying the right S. There's a slot and there's a stool. Wait, shit. The more recent of those two S's, stool. Wait, hold on. I have it. I actually own it physically. Basically, though, they represent Old Man Cap, like we discussed, and that's they've already known each other, not how they meet. But in the show, how do you think, Hunter, that what legal case do you think will bring those two together?
I've actually been thinking about this, and my official this was in case anyone's wondering, that was the setup for Mary to go find the comic.
Visual.
Yeah. I don't know because I listen. I didn't know when Daredevil was going to show up in this, and I actually thought going into this episode, I was like, I don't know, maybe they like because the show's been doing a lot of like teasing something at the end of an episode, but then it doesn't actually come into play for like 3 more episodes, and I thought maybe Titania is suing uh Jen over this trademark thing. And then, that's like a thing in the background. Like they're like, okay, Jen has some other stuff to deal with for an episode or two, and then that's like a thing in the background. And then eventually Matt comes in because like she's gonna need a lawyer to represent her, and like who else but the guy who represented Spider-Man? And like then he comes in. I tweeted about this. I know what you're about to ask. Does he remember? Is that what you were thinking?
Not what
Okay.
I was gonna
Never
say,
mind.
does he actually represent Spider-Man? He seems to have given legal advice to Spider-Man and Happy.
I guess that's a fair point. He represents Happy.
Never a court case with Spider-Man, so I mean, nobody really
Right.
represents say in that capacity. I mean,
This is another tangent we can go on because I am very curious. Because okay, so he gave legal advice to Peter Parker, right?
yeah,
But now, because of magic, he no longer remembers who Peter Parker is. So,
I don't know what that
how
magic.
does he remember?
I'm just gonna say it. I'm just gonna say it because the one movie I've written a review for, was No Way Home. That spell made no sense. Keep going.
No, it didn't. But here's the thing: we now have to live with it. So, so,
It's just funny.
so if he doesn't remember Peter Parker, but he never represented Spider-Man, does the spell change it? Like, does he forget all of the like that time period in his life, like those couple days, or does he now remember it as I gave legal advice to Spider-Man, but he doesn't remember who Spider-Man is? Mary.
Okay, so my problem with that movie, I really love that movie. You can read my review. Either why not? 2021. The more you think about that movie, the less it makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, it's fictional. That's a theme.
like
I to keep going.
5 to 6 viewings in, I agree with you.
I agree with you. Like, I think
Yeah.
going forward, we all need to agree it's fictional. Let's just have fun.
Yeah.
But the spell of forgetting Peter Parker makes little sense. I didn't see the extended cut. You did, but I know that they kind of took him out of like random photos that they had in like the.
Yeah, there's a post credit scene in the extended cut of No Way Home because I mean we can talk about it quick because we're not doing it church for it or anything, court, whatever. Um, the new post credit scene for No Way Home that replaces the Multiverse of Madness teaser is it shows a Betty Brant, like she does those high school videos, and it shows one from the end of the school year as everyone is graduating, and the joke of the after credit scene is it's supposed to better explain how the spell worked for people. And so like she shows yearbook photos and like videos of like their trip from far from home to Europe and like all of this stuff. She's like, look at all the stuff we did in the past 4 years. And it's a bunch of scenes from the Spider-Man trilogy, like high school trilogy, except it's like, Peter's face has like a balloon goes in front of it right as the picture snaps. So like he's in the photo, but you can't see Peter Parker. And that's kind of like the vibe. Like, oh, they're in Europe, but then the birds fly in front of him while the video is being recorded, so like no one can see him. And like it's not actually explained that well, but it's supposed to explain it better. Mary.
Makes no sense, and that's okay
No, it doesn't. But
because
it was the movie's like cute little way of trying to
the
give.
movie was
Yeah,
great. I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield showed up. I think it was a huge thing. Nobody expected it.
it's no one knew that it didn't leak at all.
Nobody knew.
Not a single person talked about it. Going, I left the theater and they're like, "That's the one thing we didn't know was going to happen." Was
But
that?
okay. But technically, we know the spell didn't make a lot of sense. Doctor Strange was in there to kind of help facilitate the movie and get Tobey Maguire, Garfield in it, and that's great.
Yeah.
We have that. Um, Hard bet that whenever Spider-Man comes back into in the MCU, whether it's a team up or not, there's going to be a real quick answer to that spell that made everybody forget him. I know people didn't forget Spider-Man, but
They're
still,
sweating. They're
I don't
sweating at Marvel and Sony because
yeah.
they can't make a new movie until they figure out what they're doing with the spell.
Let's all email Marvel and Sony and tell them our disgust for ability
And the spell.
We don't know what's going on with Madam Web except that they have a phenomenal cast. Other than that,
Yeah, like a real stat cast for like a Sony Spider-Man spin-off movie.
fun fact.
Um,
So in this school run,
oh, okay, never mind. I don't have to bring it back to She-Hulk. Mary got there.
She-Hulk and Daredevil represent Cap. And Cap, the young lad, pre-serum. He basically like got in this guy's face who's like a mobster, give or take. This is really
Wait, that's what it's not like a war crime?
It's like no, it's not. So it's back when he's pre-serum and he's like with
Yeah,
a
that shouldn't
friend,
count.
and his friend's brother's some like mobster, maybe like I don't know. But Cap stands in front of him pre-serum like, hey, don't shoot him, and then he does shoot the kid. To be fair, so later on, this like sibling of the person who got shot is suing Cap for wrongful death. Like, had you not like been a big mouth and got the gun, like you wouldn't be dead. Oh, okay, I guess this is fun in terms of the series. So, in this situation, Cap hires She-Hulk to defend him, but he also like makes sure Daredevil prosecutes. It's not prosecutes. It's not criminal. Represents the family who's trying to sue him, and Cap does this as Old Man Cap to get the best result. It makes no sense. It's really just for She-Hulk to like win. That's great. But it's an interesting consideration because I wonder if the show is going to have them come together in such like a not necessarily debatable situation, but like a somebody who's at the center, someone we really like, and we hope to win. Yeah, go for it.
Leapfrog.
They're gonna do leapfrog.
So, no, the villain that we know is in the show, Leapfrog, who's a very silly D-list villain. Leapfrog and his dad, Frogman, runs in the family. Again, I love comics. Um, I was trying to think, what characters do we know are in this show that could connect She-Hulk to Daredevil, and then it clicked with me that like originally Frogman, Leapfrog, that the amphibious family, they were Daredevil villains. So who is to say that that is not the episode? Also, that was like back in the era when, unless I'm misremembering, but like Daredevil in his yellow and red suit up against Leapfrog is very like OG Daredevil vibes. So that's what I have to say about that. That is my new theory in yes. Yes, Mary.
I'd like to say Daredevil Yellow. The comic's really great. But anyway, I also wonder, obviously, in this comic that I threw up specifically, Old Man Cap is the center, which is very dramatic. But I think in this show, like you point out, we don't necessarily need that because I think She-Hulk meeting Daredevil is gonna be the best that people want to need. Um, so I think that something smaller, more trivial would make sense as long as it connects them. Because I think whatever story is going to happen in those episodes.
Yeah. I think what I've learned from She-Hulk thus far is that I don't think any of the like individual episodes are going to be that grand in the sense of like I don't think that they're gonna, not that I think this is what you were implying, but I don't think that they're gonna be like, look, Old Man Cap is still alive and like we have this whole big, like, I really think that everyone's gonna hype it up and then it's just gonna be like Daredevil's in town to pick up his suit and then like Leapfrog attacks and he's like, I might as well help with this. Like, I think it's gonna be as simple as that, just based on the show thus far.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I agree that I don't think it's going to be this like major or life altering event, but I think obviously they're going to meet. Anyone doesn't think that, they haven't gone online. But they don't need real aggressive because it's interesting.
Right.
So I think, like you said, like some stupid,
Yeah. It is
interesting.
a good point. Like, it never occurred to me that Shield takes place in LA and it would imply that Matt Murdock is like in California and not New York, and then that surprises me. Yes, Mary.
I really do think that that's going to be the weird transition between what you think you know about Daredevil from Netflix to ultimately be Daredevil Born Again is he had this kind of weird phase of like I don't know what his phase was, but like the classic is not knowing
Well,
himself, like working at
doesn't in his again, you would know this better than me, but in his like California phase in the comics, doesn't Mallory Book play a role in that? Or am I crazy? Am I insane?
Yep,
Did I
no,
just imagine that?
speaks of that. I mean, Mallory Book is part of GLK and Age,
Right.
part of She-Hulk's firm. So I guess she could have, but I don't know any specific information.
I feel like maybe I'm misremembering and I just angered someone like really hard.
I keep considering the fact that he's a lawyer because he very easily be
I
just
do.
doing last law shit the whole time, and then he happens to put on his,
I,
like,
do-
oh, we just
I,
saw, and
I
then
do enjoy the last like 20 minutes of this have just been us theorizing about Daredevil instead of talking about She-Hulk
that's
episode
what
5.
people want to know, though. People saw
People
that.
do want to know, and I want to know, and all I really have left from She-Hulk episode 5 is a few notes about things I thought were funny.
Didn't know Daredevil was happening again, despite so many things that said, yes, here he comes. Um,
Also,
I
this episode didn't, to
Charlie
be,
Cox is Daredevil. I'm just saying people just are a little aggressive about it, and good for you. You love things. You're passionate. I appreciate you.
I
He's
agree with all this.
he's gonna be great. He's gonna be different though here, and you're gonna have to just appreciate Charlie Cox's range.
I will say I do like this episode is the first episode of She-Hulk that, unless I watched all the way through the credits and still somehow missed it, didn't have like a post credits scene, and I think it's because they decided like this teaser of Daredevil's helmet in the end was like good enough as our post credits.
I got it.
Um, a few other little notes that I made was that I love Jen in this episode, and that she like I like that they keep making fun of her sense of style, and that she hates like the fashion industry because me too. Um, and I liked when they were going over her matcher bio. Um, I saw that.
Oh,
Mean green and straight poured into these jeans. That's the title of the episode, but I was also like, that's
that was
crazy.
funny.
And then
That
when
was
they were like, what is your
in Forrest bed. Yeah.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like this episode I was laughing pretty hard.
And that's what my issue was. I feel like I wasn't laughing as hard. And to be fair, I watched the first four in broad daylight, like one after the other.
Right.
And this one I watched at midnight, Pacific time. Um, so like different vibes. But I will say I didn't think that was funny, because it just didn't seem like Jen to say
Yeah.
shit like I want to
But
reinforce
that
it.
goes back to the idea that like when Jen was going on dates, it was less like looking for love and more like if let's we're adults here, and if you're not an adult, close your ears. But like, come on, Jen was trying to get laid, and that's what happened. That's what was
I
happening.
mean, that should have been clear from episode.
It should have been clear. If you
Yeah.
watch those episodes and you're listening to this and you didn't pick up on it, go to bed because you're probably a child.
I mean, even she did last episode. She did get laid, but then the guy noticed she looked like Jen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was a successful
And then I
venture,
came
but
back
like,
for this episode, and that was kind of like it was satisfying that it came back in such a like a I don't know, like there's no ambiguity way. Like he said if she looked like that and I had known that, I would not have put her. Like one, that's very sad. Like that was
it was
really
very sad. That was a pretty sad moment, and I like that. That's the thing that makes Mallory be like, right, like you're also a person, and that sucks, and like it's pain. It
sad.
was painful for the rest of us to hear it
Yeah.
too.
One thing I weirdly liked about that is that there was no resolution to that. Like Jen had to just be kind of she had to accept. I
It's
mean,
like take
obviously
it.
she that was part of
Yeah.
the thing, but like there was no like conversation of yeah, I feel good about myself anyway. It was just like this guy's
Yeah.
shitty
Well, this I
and
made a
like
note of it.
what it is, and we move on. It was to me as a woman like very realistic. Like there are people who think that, And I mean, to be fair, there are people who are not attracted to certain people. That is what it is. Like, that's wrong. Um, but that affects people's lives or dating lives very significantly, and that is what was shown in court. And she kind of just had to live with it, and she had to live with the fact that as She-Hulk, to some people, she was a very different person, and I
Yeah.
think that that was a very meaningful kind of understanding of, yes, I turn into She-Hulk, I turn back into Jen, I'm the same person, but like that's really how I go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I made a note that I did enjoy like the converse. Again, it doesn't really wrap it up because, like you said, she kind of just has to take it and move on. But I did. I made a note that I enjoyed the conversation between her and Mallory post that, and she makes that comment of like, yeah, like I can literally have superpowers, and like I'm still just not good enough for like some people. And I think the one that I wrote down specifically was, oh yeah, she makes a comment of uh which I thought this was funny. Mallory's like, most lawyers that I know would not have embarrassed themselves publicly to win a case the way you just did. And Jen so like jokingly is like, yeah, I'm always willing to throw myself under the bus. I thought that was really funny. Yes, Mary.
I think good lawyers would always do that. I do think that
Okay, I was thinking
someone
something. I was like, I don't know. I feel like legally speaking, if you were
I
about to
think
get sued,
only most superficial people would like lose a major law case to preserve their reputation. Because first of all, losing a major law case does not help your reputation. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the point was that Jin has humility and a broader personality than maybe you and people. But yeah, I'm still stuck on the Mallory book thing because she definitely was cut. She definitely was cut from the first three.
well, I'm sure that she will be in the rest of the show now. Now that they've established her as like friends with Jen and also part of the Superhuman Law Division. Yes, yes, Mary.
Sorry, something we didn't talk about last time, but kind of comes up this time. Nikki, her paralegal, last time when
We had a what?
hetero what?
I feel like your audio cut out for a second.
Hello.
Your audio cut out for a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, Mary.
Okay. Nikki, Nikki, her paralegal, was helping Jen set up her matcher profile and was scrolling through and like swiping on people and said, hetero life is so dim, I think is what she said. And the actress later revealed, like, yes, that actress, Nikki, is bisexual, which is big for Marvel. I'm not being technical bisexual character, but she mentioned that she has a secret crush on Mallory. And you can kind of see it in this episode when Mallory first comes in and Nikki, like, runs in and is like, what? What's going on? What? And so I think that's sweet. And I wouldn't have thought about it had I not seen that actress's interview about it. But a lot of stuff was, I don't know, cut, but like not, it didn't end up in the final product,
Right.
despite the fact that it was clearly intended to on some level. And I think She-Hulk makes sense that it's a show that would introduce concepts like queer women, um, but it is there, and they did not focus on it because it was a character, but it is there. Mallory book is was originally part of that in certain of secret crushes. I don't know, but interesting side fact. Yeah,
Well, we talked about this episode. Well, we talked about this episode for about 40 minutes, and we've talked for about an hour and 10. Is there anything else in this episode that you really want to cover before we call it? Or are we feeling like this is a good stopping point for She-Hulk Episode 5, Me and Green, and Port into those jeans?
that's funny. I think that's it for me.
Okay, well, in that case, I hope everybody has enjoyed it. We had a good time. It was the best of times. It was not the worst of times because it was only the best of times. Um, we talked about Daredevil. We talked about this episode. We talked about how She-Hulk probably deserves an extended cut. And for the fifth episode in a row, we talked about Spider-Man: No Way Home, and I think that that's a pretty good track record.
I think
And
that we talked about it on the first episode.
I bet if we go back, I found a way. I bring.
Jim and Mark Ruffalo. I don't even think of his name as Bruce Banner anymore. He's just Mark
It's
Ruffalo.
just Mark. It's
Jim
just
and
Green Mark
Mark Ruffalo
Ruffalo.
on an island. I don't think we talked about.
No, we did because I brought up the fact that Bruce gives her a "with great power comes great responsibility" speech, and that it was like the one Aunt May gave Peter in No Way Home.
Fine.
Never underestimate my ability to organically bring Spider-Man into a conversation.
Didn't think it made sense, but you do you.
um. Anyway, thank you everybody for listening. I've been one half of your host, Hunter.
I've been the other half, Mary.
We will see you next week for She-Hulk episode 6.